Oh, hello. I'm giving away 50 Marvel Secret Layers this Thursday, May 15th and Sunday, May 18th on Whatnot. That's right, 50 Marvel Secret Layers from Wolverine to Captain America to Deadpool to Storm and everyone in between. Just claim your $15 credit by creating a new account at www.whatnot.com/invite/Tolarian College and then tune in Thursday, May 15th and then again Sunday, May 18th where I'm giving away 50 Marvel Secret Layers. Thank you to Whatnot for sponsoring. More about them at the end of this video. Has the recent unbanning of a Magic card just drowned an entire format in out-of-control blue combos? Otherwise known as blue combos? The card in question? High Tide, a power piece so strong you'd never guess it was a common. A common? Oh no! Then the format in question must be Pauper? They unbanned High Tide? What was the Pauper format panel thinking? Pauper is ruined forever. Again. Or so people think. Because this actually happened a few weeks ago, and guess what? Pauper wasn't actually ruined forever. Or was it? Well, let's take a look. Yes, at the end of March, Pauper did indeed receive a seismic shakeup. Not only were Basking Brood Scale, Deadly Dispute, and Kuldotha Rebirth all banned in Pauper, but 2 additional cards came off the ban list on a trial basis: Prophetic Prism and High Tide. Many Magic the Gathering Pauper players were shocked by the unbanning of High Tide in particular, as despite being a common, High Tide is the furthest thing from a fair card and has been kept out of the format for as long as the sanctioned format has existed. So why unban it? Isn't that dangerous? Well, alongside this announcement, Gavin Verhey released an article explaining the logic behind both the bans and the unban. In it, he provided 3 reasons for the decision. First, many Magic the Gathering players like spell-based combo and want to be able to play it in Pauper. The archetype is a cornerstone of eternal formats, and it deserves to be achievable in Magic's cheapest eternal format. Second, many of High Tide's most broken enablers, such as Frantic Search and Cloud of Fairies, remain banned in Pauper. The format also has plenty of answers. Pauper decks are allowed to run a pile of Red Elemental Blasts, for instance. God, Pauper's fun. Finally, High Tide is an iconic card that many Magic the Gathering players have fond memories of playing once upon a time in legacy formats of old. With every Magic the Gathering format now dominated by the power level of recent card design, it's nice to give players the ability to indulge in nostalgia from time to time. In fact, I've often argued that's one of Pauper's major selling points. Play with your favorite classic cards, and now one of those classic cards is High Tide. So it's been several weeks since High Tide became legal in Pauper for the first time in Pauper's sanctioned history. Was the unbanning really a mistake? Let's check in on the cheeky mana generator, shall we? Those of you who haven't encountered High Tide before might be asking, what the heck even is the big deal about this card anyway? High Tide is an instant that makes all islands in play tap for an additional blue mana until end of turn. It also stacks. In other words, resolving 2 High Tides makes your islands tap for 3 mana. 3 High Tides will make your islands tap for 4 mana, and so on. Combine this with spells that untap your lands, and all of a sudden you're generating buckets full of blue mana to do all sorts of nefarious deeds with. There are, of course, a number of ways to go infinite with High Tide. Palancron, with an active High Tide and at least 6 islands in play, generates infinite mana. This is because Palancron untaps 7 of your islands when it enters, which unlocks a whopping 14 blue mana with an active High Tide. You can then pay a mere 4 mana to return Palancron to your hand, recast it, untap your lands again, and generate blue mana each time. You can also generate Infinite Storm by combining High Tide with Snap, and a creature that can return a spell from your yard, such as Archaeomancer. If you cast High Tide, then cast your Archaeomancer, you can pick back up the High Tide and cast it again. Your islands now tap for 3 each, meaning Snap now nets you 4 mana each time you cast it. You pay 2 for Snap, then untap 2 islands. Snap back your own Archaeomancer, then recast it with an extra 4 mana, picking back up your Snap to repeat the process. You won't net mana unless you have either a cost reducer like Sapphire Medallion in play, or a way to cast High Tide a 3rd time, but you will generate Infinite Storm. The earliest builds of High Tide won by generating mana with untapped spells like Frantic Search, Turnabout, and Time Spiral, casting additional copies of High Tide along the way, until eventually you had enough mana to cast a massive Stroke of Genius targeting your opponent. Kai Buddha's iteration of this deck ran a single copy of Palinchrome that it would find eventually. Since then, there have been a number of iterations that crop up in Eternal formats. From Storm decks that eventually cast a lethal Brain Freeze pulled from the sideboard with Cunning Wish, to decks whose only win condition is Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, drawing from an empty library. So you can see why this common that does so many powerful things needed to be banned. Actually, this card is so powerful, they needed to ban it before anyone in Pauper could even play with it. They preemptively banned it. When the online and paper Pauper metagames unified in 2019, making Pauper an officially sanctioned format, High Tide was one of 3 cards pre-banned in the initial announcement, alongside Sinkhole and Hymn to Torok. While Sinkhole and Hymn were both banned due to the high likelihood that they would be oppressive, High Tide was merely banned as a precaution. If a High Tide combo deck was one of the best things to do in Pauper right out of the gate, it could kill all enthusiasm for this new format before it had a chance to prove itself. High Tide remained banned in Pauper ever since, but now it's free at last, and honestly, so far it's doing exactly what the Pauper format panel hoped that it would do. In Gavin's article explaining the unban, he wrote that the best case scenario is for High Tide to be a viable option beneath the very best decks. He said that High Tide combo is a very bad deck to have as a top 3 archetype in Pauper due to frustrating play patterns for opponents. But as a fringe playable archetype for lovers of spell-based combo, that's High Tide's sweet spot. Let's take a look at High Tide's results in Pauper events over the past few weeks. 9th place in a Magic Online Challenge on May 4th, 9th place again in a Magic Online Challenge on April 25th. Apart from that, a smattering of 5-0s and some finishes hovering around the top 32 of various tournaments. In other words, the deck is not broken, but that doesn't mean it isn't powerful. Take a close look with me at how the Pauper version of High Tide capitalizes on the buckets full of blue mana that this little common can create. High Tide Combo is a mono-blue deck that combines multiple copies of High Tide with card draw spells and cards that untap your lands, digging through your deck and generating extra mana with each untap. Eventually, you generate so much mana that you can replicate Stream of Thought upwards of a dozen times, milling your opponent's entire library in a single turn. Each replication of Stream of Thought requires 4 mana, and each copy mills your opponent for 4. That means you'll need 45 mana to mill your opponent for 48 cards, or 49 mana to mill them for 52. It's only 12 copies of Stream of Thought, Michael. What could it cost? 50 mana? As absurd as it might seem to have to generate almost 50 mana in a single turn in order to win, it's actually not as difficult as it sounds. High Tide is just that broken. The key card to the deck dates back to the original Kamigawa block. Psychic Puppetry is an untap effect with Splice onto Arcane, a very strange mechanic that's rarely relevant these days. But in Pauper High Tide, Splice onto Arcane isn't just relevant, it's basically the entire game plan. Here's how Splice onto Arcane works. When you go to cast an arcane spell, you can pay the splice cost of any Splice onto Arcane spells in your hand to fuse those spliced cards' abilities onto the arcane card you're casting. Now, I know that explanation sounds a little arcane, but in practice, it's not quite as complicated as it sounds. Here, I'll show you. Let's say you want to splice a Psychic Puppetry to a Reach Through Mists. Pay 1 mana for the Reach and another 1 for the Spliced Puppetry. When Reach Through Mists resolves, you'll draw a card, then untap a permanent. The Reach Through Mists then goes to your graveyard, while the Psychic Puppetry remains in your hand to be cast at a later time, or just spliced onto another arcane spell down the road. The same is true if you splice 2 Psychic Puppetries. Pay 1 blue blue for each one, plus the blue for the reach through mists, resolve your spliced spell, put the reach in the yard, and keep the 2 puppetries in hand. It's like the old saying goes, a puppetry in hand is worth 2 on the stack. Because the puppetry splicing it is like putting it on the stack while keeping a copy. It's a good joke, okay? All told, there are 16 arcane cards in most High Tide deck lists. 4 Reach Through Mists, 4 Ideas Unbound, 4 Peer Through Depths, and of course, 4 Psychic Puppetry. And yes, you can splice Psychic Puppetry onto Psychic Puppetry. The non-puppetry arcane cards are all card draw effects of various stripes. Reach Through Mists draws a single card, Peer Through Depths grabs an instant or sorcery from among the top 5 cards in your deck, and Ideas Unbound draws you 3 cards for just 2 mana. Sure, you have to discard 3 cards on your end step, but ideally when you're casting Ideas Unbound, your end step won't matter. You'll be winning that turn. Tying the deck together is a powerful blue tutor that's rarely used for anything fair. Merchant Scroll, a sorcery for 1 mana and 1 blue that searches your deck for a blue instant card. The main card you'll be looking for with Merchant Scroll is High Tide, since you'll need to resolve at least 2 copies of High Tide at the start of your combo turn in order to win. Once your tides are sufficiently high, you can also search for any of the other instants in the list, such as Psychic Puppetry or Peer Through Depths. Merchant Scroll is an incredibly important card in the deck. You need to resolve multiple copies of High Tide to win, and Merchant Scroll effectively gives you 8 copies of High Tide in your deck. Unfortunately, a playset of Merchant Scroll alone costs how much? Wow, that's almost as much as many other Pauper decks in the format. The cheapest printing of the card, the 8th edition Uncommon, currently goes for about $12 whole on online sellers. A single card costing $12 whole, this is without a doubt the biggest barrier to entry for the deck from a price standpoint. You really can't replace the card selection Merchant Scroll provides. Against blue decks, a card Merchant Scroll will often find is your one-of main deck Gigadrowse. Gigadrowse is a fantastic card in combo decks, a blue instant with Replicate for a single blue that taps any permanent. Gigadrowse can be used on your opponent's end step to tap down their lands, preventing them from holding up counter magic for your combo turn. If you have a spare High Tide you don't mind spending for this purpose, you can even High Tide before you Gigadrowse to get even more replications, such as if you need to tap down your opponent's lethal army of creatures. So that's what goes in the deck, but there's more to High Tide combo than what's in the deck list. After all, this is not your typical Magic the Gathering deck. Piloting High Tide combo accurately is tricky and requires some practice. I'll walk you through some of the basics for how to pilot the deck so that you can get a head start if you decide to pick the deck up for yourself. The goal of the High Tide combo is twofold. First, generate mana. You need to count to 45 or so, though by the time you get that high, you'll likely clear the bar by a good margin. The second thing you need to do is find your stream of thought. Of course, the longer you can wait to start your combo, the easier it will be, but technically speaking, you can actually win the game as early as turn 3 with the right hand. You'll need to resolve 2 High Tides before you start your combo. Tap 1 island to cast your first High Tide, then tap your second island, floating an extra blue mana to cast your second High Tide. Your third land will now tap for 3 blue. That makes any 2 mana arcane spell you cast, alongside a spliced Psychic Puppetry, costs 0 mana effectively. 2 mana for the arcane spell, 1 for the Psychic Puppetry, then you untap your 3 blue producing island. Ideas Unbound with the spliced Puppetry, for instance, draws 3 cards for 0 mana. Not a bad rate if I do say so myself. You can also add an additional mana by splicing your Puppetry to a Reach Through Mists, as that costs just 2 mana and untaps your 3 blue island. Eventually, you'll find additional copies of Psychic Puppetry and/or additional copies of High Tide. In either case, your spliced arcane cards are going to become better than free. They'll actually start to add mana. And as you dig deeper into your deck, you'll find more copies of High Tide and more copies of Puppetry to continue adding more and more mana. At some point, you'll find your stream of thought. At that point, all you need to do is make mana. Your card draw spells are still useful for generating mana, and finding you more arcane cards to splice onto. But it's important to keep your eye on the prize, counting your mana. When you have 3 copies of Psychic Puppetries, you'll be able to start splicing them to each other. Keep track of your mana, untap your lands, and eventually you'll count to that magic 45 number that you need to replicate a lethal stream of thought. This kind of combo is what's known as a non-deterministic combo. You're not generating an infinite loop here. Rather, you're digging through your deck a finite number of times until you've amassed the resources necessary to win. If your deck is stacked poorly, such as if you have too many lands in a row or not enough card draw, puppetries, or high tides, your combo might fizzle, but that's not that likely to happen. What is more likely to happen is your opponents interacting with you enough to prevent you from killing them. As sweet as this combo is, it's inherently pretty fragile, as it requires a lot of moving pieces and you don't have much of a margin for error. You're often going to need every last mana you produce at the start of your combo to win, so you don't always have the ability to fight through your opponent's counter magic. This is made especially true because High Tide also boosts the blue mana production of your opponent's islands. That makes it very hard to fight through counter magic when piloting a High Tide deck, as the additional mana you give your opponent can be used on more counter spells. A single island taps for counterspell after a High Tide resolves, after all, and that is why Giga Drowse is so useful. It doesn't matter how much mana your opponent's islands produce if they're tapped. There are no free counterspells legal in Pauper anymore, so if your opponent is tapped out, either by their own doing or because you've made them Giga Drowsy, you're safe to ride your High Tide to victory. All in all, I believe the High Tide unban was a good one. Thus far, it seems like the Pauper format panel hit the bullseye they were targeting. High Tide Combo is a viable deck, but far from the best thing that you can do in Pauper. If you want to play it, you can play it, but you don't have to play it if you want to win. And more importantly, when you do play against it, you'll have plenty of answers available to you to prevent your High Tide opponent from surfing all over you. The specific configuration of High Tide Combo is ultimately up to you, but I've included an Architect link to my recommended build in the description of this video. Give the deck a try yourself by using their playtester feature. If you are ever going to get a feel for a deck before you buy it, this would be the one to do it for, given the ridiculous price of Merchant Scroll. Though I do hope you give it a try once for yourself, because High Tide Combo is an absolute blast to pilot. Each game is a new puzzle to solve. How do I sequence my spliced spells? What card am I looking for off my canned trips? How do I beat my opponent's interaction? If answering questions like those on the fly mid-game sounds like fun to you, then I highly recommend building High Tide Combo for yourself. But if that doesn't sound like fun to you, there are so many other Pauper decks to check out. There's some for just about every playstyle, and best of all, they only cost about $40 to $50 for a complete deck that is tier 1, is never going to rotate out, and aside from something being banned, is never going to go away. Worst case scenario, something does get banned and you can either replace it or, well, I mean, the decks are $40, so it's pretty good. Pauper is one of the best formats out there, so if you've never given it a try, maybe you'd like to today. And I hope very much this video has been of some help to you. Remember, I am giving away 50 Marvel Secret Layers this upcoming Thursday and Sunday on Whatnot. Whatnot is just like if Twitch and eBay had a baby. People are able to list items at buy it now prices or just auction them off live during a stream. You're able to enter giveaways, chat with the streamer. It's an absolute blast. And right now, if you create a brand new account using my invite code, you get a $15 credit to spend on anything on Whatnot. In my store or anyone's store. I've got everything from signed cards to signed playmats and other great goodies. And best of all, I'm giving away 50 Marvel Secret Layers. You don't have to spend anything for a chance to walk away with one of these. So just come on and hang out with me this Thursday and Sunday at Whatnot at the times below and create your account and claim your $15. Hey, $15 of free magic stuff sounds great. And it's 50 Marvel Secret Layers that I'm giving away. Thank you, Whatnot, for giving me 50 Marvel Secret Layers to give away, and of course, for sponsoring this video.
Next time on Shuffle Up and Play.
Welcome to Shuffle Up and Play. Today, it's our fan episode. We have brought fans out to play with us today, and I'm so excited, especially because I've brought out my biggest fan, Voxy. You just love Tulare Community College. Try looking a little excited to be here.
The daggers in her eyes.
This is how Brian Kiblet feels all the time. Big dragon, this is so cool. Yeah, like flip my car.
That is exactly what Brian Kiblet sounds like. I've met him.
I'm gonna swing.
Yeah, we all know where it's coming.
We're the problem.
Yeah. If I eat the other two, are they just gone?
Ass is not a swear.
Yes, it is!
No, it isn't.
Do you want a hug?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll come.
People are mean to me on the internet.
It's an O2.